Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm going to be giving you a spoiler-free review for John Wick Chapter 4. As always, I will be going into spoilers towards the end of the video. I will, of course, give a warning before I talk about it because there are a few things spoiler-related that I would like to talk about. But before that, we're just going to go through my spoiler-free positives and negatives of the film, give it a rating out of 10, and then we will, of course, get into those spoilers. If you'd like to see my reactions to the first 3 John Wick films, all 3 of those are on my channel. I will put a link in the description to that playlist. All 3 of them were very action-packed, some of the best action I've seen in film history, and they also had pretty interesting stories. They're not the greatest things of all time, but they're decent enough, but the action is really what you watch these movies for. And the 4th one is no different. The 4th one is a really solid action film. Starting off with the positives, the action in this film is probably the best in terms of the quantity in the entire franchise. There is so much action in this film, and some of the sequences are easily the best sequences in the franchise, probably in terms of action, period. Like, I'm not even exaggerating when I say that there's one scene in particular with a dragon's breath shotgun. I'm not gonna say anything else, but oh my god, it was amazing. The way they're able to film these scenes, they never are boring with where the camera is, and I just absolutely love how they're able to find really interesting positions to shoot the action scene. It's never just, front and center and that's it. Sometimes it's above, sometimes it's further out, sometimes it's up close. It really just depends on the scene, and it's always really, really incredible, and it always engages you in the moment 1000%. Through this entire film, there are some action sequences that last like 10 plus minutes long, and there's even one part of this movie where there's a bunch of action that just keeps going on for like 30 plus minutes consecutively. It is absolutely insane. I have never seen a movie with this much consistent action, and with majority of it being really well done, well choreographed, well directed, well executed. It was amazing to watch. One thing I also really loved about the action in this movie is that it wasn't just John Wick killing people the whole time. Obviously, they were able to incorporate some other characters in the past couple films as well, but for the most part, it's usually just John Wick killing people. But this one has like over 4 other characters who do get a lot of great moments to shine when it comes to action. In particular, Donnie Yen's character, which his name was Kane, and Kane was really cool. If you like Daredevil, you'll like his character. He has some really great action scenes. There's a couple other characters as well, whether the characters are using guns or melee weapons. It's really cool to get to see a bunch of characters have time to shine, because as much as it's really fun to see John Wick kicking ass, I do like to see some other characters doing it as well. And just like some of the other movies, they're really able to incorporate a lot of diverse body types to make the scenes more interesting. Like there's one scene where this one girl's fighting off against like a really big buff guy, and another scene where John Wick's fighting against a guy who quite literally looks like he's Kingpin straight out of the Spider-Man comics. And those very unique body types makes for some really interesting and different fight scenes. I mean, you go back to chapter 3, they had that fight scene against that, I believe he was a basketball player, and he was like almost 7 foot tall, and he was fighting John Wick in the 3rd film. Like, that was really cool. They do that in this one a bunch as well, with a bunch of different types of characters, and I absolutely loved what they were able to do with that. Bill Skarsgård's character in this film, he plays the villain. He is incredible. He does kind of feel just kind of like thrown in there in this film because he has an important part to play in the whole story, but he's just kind of, the first time we see him. But it works. I really do think it works. He plays a really menacing villain that I actually found to be quite interesting, and they do spend a lot of the runtime developing his character because this is a long movie. This is 2 hours and 50 minutes, making it by far the longest John Wick film by like over 40 minutes. I think the other longest one was chapter 3, and that one was only 2 hours and 10 minutes. So this is the longest one by a long shot, and it definitely makes that runtime worth it. You never feel like this movie is too long. I literally never felt that at one point in this film. It spends a lot of time developing these new characters, and it also has a lot of time where it's just straight action that is really entertaining to watch. The setting is great. There's a bunch of new locations. It's not just a bunch of fighting in New York City like it was for a couple of the other ones. The other ones had some new locations as well, but this one has so many cool places. So there's a whole scene in Japan for like 30 to 40 minutes of just full action in Japan, and I absolutely loved those sequences. They go to Berlin, which actually the Berlin scenes were probably my favorite parts of the movie. And then there's also scenes in Paris, which were pretty cool as well, especially what they're able to do with different elements of Paris. And I loved it. It just adds to the diversity of the locations that they're going to in this film, so you never feel like they're just in the same place for too much of the film, and so it starts to feel a little stale. It never feels stale. I think the set pieces, the characters, the fighting styles, all of those things are what matters most in action scenes, and it is nailed here really well. Not perfectly, but it's mostly nailed. I would also like to say Winston in this film is probably the best he's ever been in this franchise. He's a character I've always enjoyed in this franchise, but this is where I think he has the most interesting part to play in the story. There's also Hiroyuki Sanyada. I think I'm saying his name right. I'm not 100% sure. His character, he's fantastic as well. He definitely doesn't have as many scenes to play in the story as Donnie Yen, but his scenes are probably also some of the best scenes in the movie. I mean, I've said that about a lot of scenes, but there's so many scenes that are just outstanding. And this movie actually does have some interesting narrative developments in the story. It's not as kind of light on story as some of the other films might be. Even though it has a ton of action, they actually do find a lot of good moments to just kind of let the characters breathe a little bit and have some really good in-depth conversations. And the theme of John Wick's just insane survival over the past 4 movies is really talked about a lot here. Like, will that last forever, or will he eventually have to get out of this situation? And that question is brought up quite a bit. There's a lot of callbacks to the first one as well when it comes to, you know, his wife and the dog and everything like that. They make a lot of good callbacks, whether it's metaphorically speaking or it's just straight up characters saying things. I absolutely love how they're able to tie in the rest of this franchise rather than just making it feel like a separate film. It definitely feels like a really solid 4th entry in this franchise. Now let's get into the negatives. There's only really 2 things I want to say for the negatives. We're going to talk about some more positives in the spoiler section because I do have some more positives to talk about. But for the negatives, my biggest problem with this film, and there's also something that I did not like about the end of chapter 3, and it's the bulletproof suit that John Wick wears. And the reason I have an issue with it, there's a couple reasons. First of all, it does feel like a cheap way of making the action scenes a bit easier to shoot. The action scenes are still incredible, don't get me wrong, but I always get a little annoyed when I see him easily get out of a situation because he pulls out his, like, he has like a suit and he kind of just puts it up a little bit and uses it as a shield, and he blocks all bullets. He'll block like any type of bullet that comes out of any gun in this movie with this suit. It's a bit much, maybe blocking like 1 or 2 bullets here and there, but he literally blocks, I would say, probably like 500 shots in this movie. I'm definitely exaggerating, but he blocks quite a bit of shots in this movie. And to make matters worse, most of the characters have these suits. Like, sure, most of the time it's not a problem because they'll just jump to doing something very different a couple seconds later. Like, they'll have the little shield blocking thing and then they'll start, you know, punching each other, and it'll be really well directed, so I never really care that much. But I do think the action scenes would be even better if they didn't have that situation, and instead they found a way to put John Wick in a position where he wouldn't be getting shot at in the first place. The reason they do this suit thing, I know why they do it. They do it because they don't have to worry about where John Wick is in the set piece of the action as much, and same for the other characters. Because normally, if they don't have these bulletproof things, they have to be really worried about where is John Wick in reference to every other enemy on the set piece right now, because chances are those enemies should be shooting at John Wick, and they're not, you know, stormtroopers, so they're probably gonna hit their shots. So how do we make it so they do hit their shots, but John doesn't die? And we also don't have to worry about John being like a super ninja trying to duck bullets and get out of the way. It's a reasonable thing to do. I understand the problem there, but it just makes the scenes look like they took the easy way out rather than really thinking about, okay, how should we do this scene so John realistically can get out of these situations without having the enemies look stupid, and also without having this really sci-fi bulletproof suit thing that does not exist in real life, to my knowledge. I don't think there's anything in the world right now that could just be that thin, could be as light as paper, because it's not like it's heavy for him. He just kind of uses it as a suit and just blocks bullets just like that. It could block bullets, maybe, but it would still push him back. It would still injure him. It wouldn't be this thing where he just holds it up like Captain America's shield from Marvel. It's just so like, no. I don't like it. It worked in chapter 3 because it was only there for a little bit in the end, and he didn't use it as much. But in this one, he uses it so much, and I'm just like, I don't like it. And same thing for other characters. When there's hand-to-hand combat scenes in this movie or there's melee weapons being used, it's always amazing. And most of the gun scenes are pretty good too. But whenever there's any blockage of the vests, or not vests, you know what I mean, the suits, I'm just like, I don't like that. And kind of similar to what I just said, John Wick also gets tossed around this movie like salad. And yeah, he does in other films as well, but it's a bit too much in this movie. And like some of it's comical and it is funny. Like they have a lot of good humor in this movie where, genuinely speaking, it is very funny seeing him get thrown around. There's a couple scenes in particular that gave my theater a huge laugh. But like it gets to the point where I'm like, okay, he should be in pieces by now. Like I know, you know, these movies aren't supposed to be 1000% realistic. It's trying to pay homage to those 80s action films where it's a bit campy and a little more, you know, fun and bombastic like that. But I think there should be a sense of realism, tiny bit at least, to where he's not just getting thrown around like that. They don't have to throw him around like that. They don't. Some of it was, you know, they could do, certainly, but him falling from like really high places and just smashing onto the floor, like, we can't be seeing that in every film because he should be in pieces by now. He's not a superhero. He's a badass, but he's not a superhero. So there's a certain extent to it where I'm like, okay, you can chill. But that's all the negatives I have. In terms of a rating out of 10, we might as well just give it a rating because I don't have anything else to say in terms of negatives. It's a really incredible film. Every John Wick film is, so this one is really no different. I'm gonna give it a 9.4 out of 10. I don't think it's quite, you know, 10 out of 10 material, but it's a 9.4. It is so damn good. Certainly the best movie of 2023 thus far, and I definitely recommend going to see it. If you are a fan of action films, if you are a fan of John Wick, you should definitely go see this. So in terms of spoilers, the only two things I want to talk about are, of course, the character deaths of John Wick and Sharon. Is his name Sharon? Sharon is how you pronounce it, I believe. I'm never really good at pronouncing names. You guys know this by now. Of course, he's played by Lance Reddick, who recently passed away, unfortunately. And his character death in this movie was very, like, I feel like the reaction that my audience had, and I guess people in general had, to his death in this movie was a lot different given the fact that he recently passed away. And I think they did a really good job with this scene. Obviously, they weren't expecting him to pass away, but it felt like it was almost honoring Lance Reddick himself just with that scene. They even had him say it was as a pleasure being with you, or something like a pleasure working with you, something like that, right before he died. And I'm just glad they were able to give him that scene, because I do think out of all the movies, this was his best, even though he was only in it for a little bit. Those few moments were really emotional and really impactful. And then, of course, John Wick's death, which this one kind of shocked the hell out of me. Like, I didn't realize what was going on at first. I didn't take me until they showed his grave, until I was like, they killed him off? What? I was just so in shock because I've never thought this franchise would end, to be honest, and it's not really ending because they have a spin-off planned with Ana de Armas called Ballerina, and apparently John Wick is going to appear in that, so obviously it takes place before Chapter 4 then. I'm not sure when it's going to take place, but I guess we'll wait and see. But I was shocked. I really, really was. I thought they were going to continue the franchise with a number 5 and a number 6, and I've just been seeing too many movies lately where characters are presumably dead and they come back to life. It's been happening in too many movies. So when I saw him, like, you know, kind of dying out there at the end, I was like, he's fine. He's gonna be fine. He'll be all right. They show the grave and I'm like, shit. Like, it didn't really give me time to like grieve or anything. It just kind of happened. I was like, oh, damn, they went there. Like, this is the end of John Wick, it seems. And obviously you can bring him back in a spin-off movie, but that's probably gonna be it then. They can't do a John Wick 5. You know what I mean? That wouldn't make any sense. So I'm shocked. I'm not mad about it, though. I don't think it's a bad thing. I think if Keanu Reeves felt like this was it, then it was it. They don't have to do a million more of these movies. They've been doing it for 9 years. They definitely could stop. Spin-offs, you know, are a different thing, but I thought it was a fitting end for the character. I thought it was. His character came full circle. He realized what kind of a person he wants to be, especially by not killing Donnie Yen's character Kane at the end there. He had the chance to do it. He could have, but he didn't. He didn't shoot the last bullet. He used that last bullet on the villain. I forget his name, but he used it on Bill Skarsgård's character. And I thought it was really fitting. I absolutely love that. I love how we got that redemption moment to save the dog as well. That was really cool. So yeah, that's all I had to say about this movie. This movie was solid. I really enjoyed it. Definitely stick around on the channel and don't forget to subscribe to it, because I am going to be doing a ranking of all 4 John Wick films probably within the next couple days, so you could see which films I would rank in first place, last place, second, third, and all that. So I will see you all in my next one. Peace out.